Hey folks, Piano Man Steve here, founder of the Piano Man Approach online piano course. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be running my song learning formula through an old classic by Hank Williams called Hey Good Lookin'. So before we get started with the lesson, I just want to remind you that if you enjoy content like this, I sure do appreciate it when you give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you have any interest, and click that bell so that I can so that you'll receive the notifications when I put new stuff out. So anyway, now that I've got that housekeeping out of the way, let's take a look at today's song, Hey Good Lookin'. So first thing is, as I said, we're going to be running this through my song learning formula so that I can show you not note for note how to play it, but rather the system that I use to learn songs that I teach in the Piano Man Approach. Some of you who know different components from that are going to be able to take this and run with it, and others, at least you're going to get an insight into how I learn songs, because it's different from, say, learning it off of a sheet music or something. So I call my formula the glide formula because it helps you glide right through learning. Let's bring my handy little visual aid up for the glide formula. As you can see, there's 5 steps in the glide formula. The first is get the chords. The second is listen to the song. The third is identify the essential feel. The fourth step is drill it down. And the fifth step is enhance it with improv and signatures. So let's get back to the piano here and work ourselves through those steps. So obviously the first thing you're going to do is get the chords. You can usually find a pretty good facsimile of the chords, or someone's got them written down with the lyrics if you just type in a Google search of the song title and chords. So in this case, Hey Good Lookin' chords. When you find one that you want to work from, then you listen to the song. So what you got to do is you got to go to YouTube or Spotify or some place that's got music, and you run a search for Hey Good Lookin' Hank Williams, and then it will be available for you to have a listen. And what you're going to do from there with the chords in front of you is identify, this is step 3, the essential feel, and that's where we come to the piano. So there are 4 essential feels that I teach. One is called the basic feel, with quarter notes in the bass line, like so. The second is called the heartbeat, or the syncopated feel, which is like this. And the third is called the country feel. Now, you might say, well, obviously this is going to be the country feel. Well, in this case, it probably is. But not every country song necessarily uses the country feel, and not every rock song is going to not use the country feel. So, but the country feel looks like this. I teach all of these feels in my course, The Piano Man Approach. But so you can always head over to pianomanapproach.com and learn more about all of that. But and then the final one is the waltz feel, which is for songs in 3/4, which I don't believe is going to be this one. So we can rule that one out, and then we just have to take the chords and run them through one of those essential feels and see which one is doing the best job of approximating what's happening with this song. Okay? So just for fun, so you can see the process working out, we can try it like this. The basic feel. Hey, hey, you good looking. What you got cooking? Yeah, it doesn't really quite sound like the song, you know? So then we move on and we try the heartbeat feel. Hey, hey, you good looking. What you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? It's like not really capturing the spirit of the song so well either. Then you try the country feel, and this is where you get that sweet spot, aha. Hey, hey, you good looking. What you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Okay, I think we've found it. Eureka. So what is the country feel? Well, so you take the chord, and in the left hand, you're going to alternate between what we call the 1 and the 5. What is that? Well, so we're on a C chord, right? C is the 1. That's why we call it C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is G. So 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So on 1 and 3, you're going to be alternating between the 1 and the 5 of the chord. And it doesn't matter what chord you're going to. You're just going to be here. So when it goes to, say, the D chord, you do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So D alternates to A. And on a G chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, G alternates with D. Back to C. That's what we're doing with the left hand, and the right hand is simply playing the chord in between those. So on counts 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, if you are aware of chords, which we do teach all of that over at the Piano Man Approach, a chord is simply a cluster of notes. A C chord would be C, E, G, and we can talk about why, and that's not really for this video. But when you know your chords, which is much faster to learn than how to actually read notes on a staff, you can do a lot of things, a lot of fun things with them very quickly. So, C, E, G, a D chord is D, F sharp, A, and a G chord is G, B, D. Okay, so suddenly with this rhythm pattern, you have the basic structure of the song already. That's what I love about this method, is that very quickly you got yourself the chords, you listen to the song, and you play around with one of those 4 feels to see where your basic place to start is before you've done any enhancements, any ornamentation, anything like that. And suddenly you've already got a basic structure for the song that really sounds pretty good. So, good stuff so far. And again, let me just play that slow so those of you who are really new to this can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so then the next step is drill it down. That's 4, the D in glide. Drill it down. Well, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, now is your time, while you've learned something really, really simple with it, is to take that simple version of the rhythm pattern and really, really get it under your fingers. You want to get those chord changes under your fingers, because when you go to the part where you're going to enhance the song and do some improv, some simple improv and some signature lines and that kind of stuff, you don't want to be devoting your brain power to finding a D chord from the C chord. You want to be able to just sort of effortlessly move from this chord to this chord to this chord, back to this chord. Okay? So that's what we're trying to do here. The drill it down is take the simplest version, don't try to do anything special with it, and really get it under your fingers. Okay, depending on the song, that'll happen really fast. Other times, you might have to work on it for a little while, but in either case, you don't want to move on to enhancing it until you've got that really under your fingers. Otherwise, you're asking your brain to process too much, and that's what usually frustrates piano players, is they ask their brains to go farther ahead than they are ready to go, and then they tell themselves silly stories like, I'm not talented enough to do this. Not true. You just tried to move too far, too quickly, and asked yourself to be unrealistic, in the moment. You'd be very, very surprised how far you can get taking small steps consistently. Okay, so the next step after you have it drilled down and you can really kind of work yourself through that chord progression, which in this case is C, another C, D, G, C. The next step is we want to enhance it. That's where the E in glide comes. We want to enhance it with simple improv and signatures. So what might we do? Well, one of the first things that I like to do for improv is there are some real simple things you can do inside any of my rhythm patterns. One is toggling. That is with your right hand, you can play. You're already here on this chord, and this, when I say simple improv, I mean we're going to use the chords that we're already playing. We don't want to have to move our hands up and down the keyboard and do anything real ostentatious. We want to be right where we already were. Okay, with a toggle, you're going to take this chord, and instead of playing all three of those notes at once, you're going to play the top part of the chord with this part of your hand, and then toggle back and forth with the thumb. So you see how that fills it out kind of nicely instead of just... Okay, let me play that real slow for those of you who are kind of new to this, so you can really get an idea of what I'm doing here. That's an idea. Another one would be to do two toggles. So you start on the thumb, toggle up, and toggle back down to the thumb. See how that adds character and it adds flavoring, if you will. It also thickens it up a little bit. Now, why am I showing you these things? It's not that any of these variations is better than any other variation. But what's nice is that at different times of the song, you can choose different variations to put in there for your rhythm patterns so that you have different kinds of herbs and spices at different times during the song. So you might, for example, decide that you want to play it just kind of straight during the first verse. Hey, hey, you good looking. What you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Then you decide, going through the second time, that maybe you want to give it a little bit of flavor. Hey, hey, sweet baby, don't you think maybe we could find us a brand new recipe? And for those of you who are thinking, oh, I'd rather play the melody than sing it, don't worry, we're going to get to that by the end of the lesson. But you need to learn the accompaniment stuff first, and then there's another formula that we can add on at the end to show you how to actually play the melody with it. Okay? So that's one thing. Another thing that you can do is what I call arpeggiating. That's where you take the individual notes of the chord and you can use them either in an ascending or a descending pattern. Now, why do I like this? Once again, we're already on this chord, right? You don't have to move your hand around. You don't have to do anything real special, but you can you can make a lot of nice, interesting sound out of it with your hand where it already would be. Okay, another thing that's part of improvisation in a way goes back to your chords. You can really get good at playing different inversions of your chords, meaning If a C chord is C, E, G, then it's still a C chord if you play E, G, C, or C, or G, C, E. It doesn't matter where you're voicing that chord. It's still a C chord, right? So you can change the sound and the timbre of the song simply by voicing your chords in different places. So we'll start here. So the idea behind that is, one, you can work your way up and down the piano a little bit easier and smoother because you don't have to make these big leaps with your hand. But two, even though this still sounds like a C chord, it does sound different than playing it here or playing it here. So what does that give you? Options. You want options. One of the reasons why I love this method of playing is that songs don't get boring to me. When you learn how to play something from a piece of sheet music, one of the main problems that I have with that, not that it isn't a perfectly wonderful skill, it's just that you've chewed all the flavor out of the gum by the time you finally learn it, because it doesn't give you anywhere to go. It's like, well, okay, this is how you play it, and it has to be played exactly this way. Whereas with this, there's a lot of small changes and a lot of small choices that I get to make in the moment. So it's never exactly the same, and yet the essence is always the same. So we're always preserving the essence of the song, and yet at the same time, it's a new experience for me, and it's one where I get to make choices in the moment. And I really like that. It keeps things fresh. It keeps it a special experience for me. And so years and years later, and then as you pick up new and more interested and complicated improvisation techniques and things like that, which I don't have time in this video to teach you a whole bunch of different stuff, but when you can do some of the more advanced things that I teach in my deep dive collection, for example. The song doesn't get old for me because I never am doing any of that stuff exactly the same way. It's always a new experience, and yet not so different that people hearing it don't recognize the song. It doesn't rob the song of its essence at all. It just keeps it fresh, keeps it interesting for me. And so songs that I first started playing 30 years ago are still just as interesting to me today as they were then. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about this particular method of playing. Okay, so we have toggles, we have arpeggios, we have chord inversions, okay? In the left hand, you can use some passing tones in the bass line. What does that mean? So you're doing this. See how it just threw in there as a little way to emphasize the beginning of that new musical phrase. I was C, G, C, and then I just sort of threw in a little run, G up to C. Following the key signature, we're in the key of C, so there's no sharps and flats. C, G, A, B, C. Little things like that. See, giving your song, giving your playing a little more character, a little more flavor, a little more sophistication is not necessarily in doing lots of really complicated things. It's in adding a little simple thing here and adding another simple thing here. And in fact, this is a special secret that I point out to my students on the regular. Complicated stuff is actually just simple stuff stacked on top of each other. So that's the fun thing. As you master the simple stuff, eventually you'll start mastering being able to do simple stuff simultaneously. And that's when suddenly everyone thinks you're doing something really, really hard and really sophisticated. But the simple fact of the matter is it was sort of like learning how to do 2 + 2 is 4, and 2 × 2 is 4, and 2 - 2 is 0, and that kind of stuff. And then eventually you learned how to combine a lot of those kinds of things into something, and it became a really complex, like algebraic equation or something like that. But at the end of the day, it was still just learning simple addition, simple subtraction, simple multiplication, simple division, you know? And so that's what's fun about it. Okay, now, we've learned some ideas for how to enhance. That's the glide formula. That gets you to singing the song or having somebody else sing the song, or if you just like the sound of the accompaniment style. One thing that I can tell you is this is really cool sounding piano music, even if you're not playing the melody. So don't discount that as just a fun instrumental thing to do. I used to play cocktail parties all the time and never play the melody and not sing because they just wanted background music. And I'd just sit in the back and... And even if I was doing more simple things like what we've talked about in this video. Okay? It's kind of fun sounding music, so that's a great art form in and of itself. But some of you are going to want to play the melody. You don't just want to play an accompaniment version. Okay, so there's another formula called flow, and I don't have a catchy visual aid for that yet, but FLOW. Okay, so what is it that it stands for? First, the F stands for find the melody. And for this, you might find a piece of sheet music. You might find a lead sheet or something through like Hal Leonard. If you know how to read music, you can do it that way. You might find a YouTube tutorial from somebody who is taught how to pick out taught the melody. Or you can train your ear to pick out simple melodies, okay? And we don't have time to do that, but I can tell you that this whole ear training thing, especially when you're using it mostly to pick out a melody, it's not as hard as people think it is, and I promise you, you're probably not tone deaf. If you can tell that this and this are not the same note, then you have a good enough ear to learn how to pick out melodies. It's just a matter of applying it a little bit, and that is something that you can work on and learn with, and we talk about that in the Piano Man approach as well. Okay, so that's my favorite way to get a melody, is to just kind of pick it out by ear, and then you've got the chords and the accompaniment work that you've already done as a basis that you can put the melody over the top. So find the melody, lay it into the rhythm pattern is what L stands for in flow, okay? So what does that mean? So when we find the melody, when we say it's like this. Okay, so what the first thing that we want to do is, like we did before, we want to strip that rhythm pattern down to something very, very simple and just get used to playing the melody over the top of that left-hand rhythm pattern. Why? Because your left hand is like the drums and the bass in the band, okay? Holds the thing together. That's your rhythmic integrity. So you're going to want to be able to hold that together. Your right hand then becomes, in this case, the keyboards, the guitars, and the singer, okay? So right now, we're just going to have the singer sing along with the drums and the bass. Okay, so what you want to do is get real good at that. Don't try to do anything other than just keep playing that melody, so that you're not going to miss the melody. Why? Same reason that we stripped it down before with our drill it down, okay? You want your brain power to be on the hardest thing you're doing. You don't want to be thinking too hard about where you don't want to be thinking so hard about where the melody is going that you're unable to find the chords or that you're unable to improvise around it, okay? So you really want to get that drilled in. Once you've laid that melody in on top of your rhythm pattern, now the O in flow stands for ornament with your improv and signatures again. Now, my favorite thing to do first and foremost is I like to, in between the melodic phrases, just return to the rhythm pattern. So here's what I mean. See how there's a little break before we go to... Anytime there's a little break, you can just return to what you'd be doing if you were playing the accompaniment. So follow me here. The accompaniment at its basis is this, right? So watch what I do. Okay, so it just gives you a place to start. You can return to the rhythm pattern. The second thing that you want to do is you want to start doing some simple harmonizing. Okay, well, the way that I encourage people to start with is play the chord and just kind of let it ring a little bit over the top or underneath that melody. So... just gives you a little extra thickening, and all you ever have to think about is the chord that you're on. So C chord. You don't have to think about harmonizing the melody. You just want to give it a little, just something so it's a little not quite as empty as just that one single note. The next thing you can do is harmonize the melody in rhythm, okay? And what that means is you want to find intervals, and we talk about this at the Piano Man approach, but you want to find intervals that work well. One is a sixth, one is a third, sometimes a fifth or a fourth, and I don't have time to really go into a lot of detail about that, but just to give you an idea, see that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That tends to work pretty well. Sometimes a fourth or a third works pretty well. Things like that can work, and you got to follow the key signature or you got to follow the notes in the chord. But that sixth interval tends to be pretty darn good. And again, in between those melodic breaks, you want to return to the rhythm pattern. Okay, and then the final thing is, once you kind of master that, is return to the rhythm pattern, but then also add in your simple rhythm pattern improvs, like playing around with different inversions of the chords, adding in toggles and arpeggios, and you want to do that in your breaks in between the melody. Okay? So obviously, different steps along the way are going to be easier for some. They'll come faster for some. We're all different. One of my favorite teachers of all time was the great painting teacher, Bob Ross, who very, very wisely pointed out on the regular, everyone's different. What comes really fast for one person will just be a son of a gun for somebody else. But the idea here is you want to break it down into these very, very small, digestible chunks, okay? You don't have to try and do it all at the same time right away. What you want to do is you want to take one section, master it, and then add another layer, and master that, add another layer, master that, and that's how this system works. It continues to compound on top of itself, and what's great is, as I pointed out, is that at the very early onset, if you just know your chords and you know these 4 basic rhythm patterns, you've got a pretty serviceable version of the song right away just by going. Okay? And then you can continue adding a layer and a layer. And even this, if you're struggling to add improv around the melody, even this sounds pretty good. And if all you can do is just kind of play a chord and let it sustain while you do that. It sounds pretty good. So what's great about this particular method is, as I say, unlike sheet music where, the sheet music is where it's at as far as your level is. So it's either approachable or it's not. But there's not much you can do about it because it's written down and this is how you got to play it. But with this, if you're a beginner, there's a version of it that you can launch into and it can sound good. And then if you become a more sophisticated player, there's more and more sophisticated techniques that you can build out of the simple techniques, and it just keeps unfolding. It's like a rabbit hole that just never ends. You just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and therefore it continues to be fun to play the song forever because your expansion as a player continues to fuel the interestingness of playing the song. And that's what I love about it, is that this method is for you, whether you are a total beginner or whether you are a pretty advanced player and have a lot of chops and a lot of fundamentals and technique already underneath your fingers. It's just a matter of your particular application, and I really love that about it, and it's served me very well for over 30 years. And I know that when I'm the day before I die, I'll be sitting playing the piano somewhere, and I'll be using this method to do it with. And it's been a pleasure, and it will continue to be a pleasure. So, okay, I'm gonna let that be for now. Hopefully, this has given you some food for thought, given you a chance to understand some broader concepts as well as some ideas on how to execute this specific song. If you have more questions about it, want to learn more about this technique and all of the ins and outs of it, you can always head over to pianomanapproach.com and learn a whole lot more about it. We've got some great freebies over there for you to check out, so I hope that we'll see you over there. And in the meantime, I'm going to get out of here for now and just simply remind you of my mantra. If you're not having fun when you're making music, you're doing it wrong. And I appreciate you tuning in, guys. Happy playing. Remember to like and subscribe. Take care.